I will call the meeting of the Construction Projects Committee to order at 7:04. Present from the committee are Mr. Mosier, Mr. Farrington, Alderman McCarthy, Mr. Hollowell, and Alderman Mosigolia. Also present are Ms. Van Twyver and Alderman Shoneman and Moriarty. Sunset Heights Architects Report.
As everybody knows, the project has been completed. The last punch list items, there's some very minor ones being done this summer. And I believe there's some additional millwork being done as well this summer. The project has officially been completed.
Okay. Short and sweet.
I like that.
Construction manager's rebuttal.
As Dan was saying, we have a few more punch list items. Working on the commissioning right now. We got a revised report back, and we're trying to make some headway on that. The last change order request that you signed for the millwork, that is in fabrication. So as soon as school is out, we'll hit that around the end of June, early July, maybe just after the 4th. And by that time, we should be wrapped up 100%. That's our goal, to be done. So.
Okay, so I assume we'll have to meet to pay for that and to release the last of the retainage.
Actually, I talked to Chris. He's homesick tonight. And I said, do we really need to meet in June? He says, not for us. Because we probably won't have that work installed, which means we probably won't bill it till July. So for us, I don't think we're going to have an application for payment next month. I don't see what we would have to bill.
All right. How much retainage do we still have?
There's still $25,000 remaining.
Ah, okay. So you're not burning up for that at this point, I take it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Any questions from the committee? Thank you guys for a job well done. Mr. Smith, I have 2 copies of the invoices in my packet. Is that just 2 copies of the same sheet?
You should have 2 invoices, one from Harvey and the other one, I believe, from SMRT.
Not the invoices, the
The summaries, the
financial sheet.
cost report.
Hopefully they have the same bottom line. I only
be
sent out
identical.
one this time.
Okay. They look to be identical. All right, I would ask for a motion to approve payment in the amount of $75,360.83 to Harvey Construction and $1,212.94 to SMRT.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hallowell. Is there a discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. Do we have any other business? Mr. Smith.
Just in your packet should be a copy of the dedication ceremony for Sunset Heights, and that's Tuesday, June 6th at 10 a.m. at the school.
Okay. Tuesday, June 6th. Okay. Mr. Farrington.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that, once again, you guys have hit it out of the park. You guys, both companies and everybody involved in this, you guys do terrific work, and I certainly do appreciate your effort. Got a little bit behind, got a lot of curve thrown at you in this project, and did a super job. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate the sir. Appreciate the
And
kind
that's
words.
to both,
Appreciate
to
the service.
the architects.
Very much
both of you.
appreciate it.
Anything else?
Move to adjourn?
Motion is to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? And we're adjourned at 7:09.
7:08. We're just gonna roll into the.
Next meeting?
Sure.
Does say it, yeah. Took a while to get that language, but now we have it. Jimmy, we're just gonna roll right into the next meeting. All set? Okay. All right, call this meeting of the Joint Special School Building Committee to order. Is Thursday, May 25th, time is 7:10 PM at the Nashua High School North Lecture Room. Clerk will please call the roll. Mr. Smith.
Alderman Dowd, Alderman McCarthy,
Present.
Alderwoman Melizagolia. Present. Alderman Moriarty,
Present.
Alderman Shoneman,
Here.
Mr. Farrington,
Here.
Mr. Hollowell,
Here.
Mr. Mosier. Here. Mr. Murataki, Ms. Elizabeth Van Twyver,
Here.
and we do have a quorum.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Alderman Dowd is dealing with a family issue tonight, which is why he can't make it.
Right, thank you. Would the clerk also read the prayer, and then Mr. Farrington lead us in the pledge?
Mighty God, we have the high honor and serious duty to manage the educational affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with a spirit of unity and understanding which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all our fellow citizens. So help us God. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Need for a non-public session, previous meeting minutes approval. Dr. McCarthy, Alderman McCarthy.
I would move that the minutes of the Joint Special School Building Committee meeting held Thursday, April 20th, 2017 be accepted, placed on file, and that the readings be suspended.
Everybody heard the motion, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Remarks by school administration? None. Construction Projects Committee report, Alderman McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that the minutes of the Construction Projects Committee meeting held Thursday, April 20th, 2017 be accepted and placed on file.
Didn't we just do that? What am I missing?
We did the joint special meeting minutes and then the construction.
Okay, yep. Okay, that's why Mr. Dowd runs this thing. Everybody heard the motion, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion passes. Alderman McCarthy.
Move that the rules be so far suspended as to allow an oral report of a meeting held earlier this evening.
Move to suspend the rules. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Alderman McCarthy.
The Construction Projects Committee met earlier this evening and received a report from the architect and the construction manager that construction is basically done except for punch list items and the casework that was approved in our last change order request. Committee took no actions except to recommend the approval of the invoices, and with that, I will move to approve payment in the amount of $75,360.83 to Harvey Construction and $1,212.84 to SMRT.
Motion is to approve the invoices. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Alderman McCarthy.
That concludes my report.
All right. Mr. Smith, the Sunset Heights dedication is going to be June 6th at 10 a.m. Is that what you said?
Correct.
Okay, just so everybody's aware of that. Any other business? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, but, yeah, Mr. Smith.
What did I say?
So I take it from
I'm
earlier.
still a little jet lagged from my trip last week, so forgive me.
Speechless. So I took it from the earlier conversation that we don't see a need to meet next month. You didn't discuss that at this committee, but, so we'll have no meetings of the construction or joint special in the month of June. barring some unforeseen.
Yeah, there's a provision in the ordinances or the state law that says the Joint Special School Building Committee must monthly report to the Board of Aldermen on the status of projects and finances. So I would assume we can just do that with a note that says nothing's changed since last month.
That sounds good to me.
So moved.
All right, let's assume we're not having a meeting in June, but that Alderman McCarthy is going to write himself a note saying that nothing has changed, which he can pass on to the rest of the board.
I wouldn't bring it up, except there have been complaints in the past when we didn't by
I'm shocked.
a member of the Board of Aldermen.
There are no members of the public. Comments by committee members.
I have a question.
Ms. Van Dwyver.
I'd like to know how we're doing on the Elm Street and the other school project of deciding what needs to be done.
Mount Pleasant?
Mount Pleasant, yeah. I understand that there's some educational things that need to be discussed or found out or something like that.
Yes, just to report back on the reports, there've been 2 facilities analysis done, which is the physical plant, both on Mount Pleasant and Elm Street was released recently. What we're working on now is the educational narratives. We sat down with the auditorium committee about 2 weeks ago to get some input directly from that group. We gleaned a lot of information, how that Keefe Auditorium is being used and what the committee in the broad base is looking at what that facility is like and what its pluses and minuses are. So we'll also include that in the educational narrative.
So when do you expect to have the narrative for the educational done?
Okay, there's 2 parts to it. We got one part about 3/4 done, and we got to start the last one, which is with the interviews. So I would say probably the end of June.
Okay, so we wouldn't have another report until July then, the July meeting, or then?
Once we have it completed, we can send it to Sean, it can be included in the packets.
For July?
Yes.
Thank you.
For the end of June.
I just want to point out that I don't think the school board has voted on either of those projects yet, have they?
We voted not to move forward with them, but to do this particular process. But we haven't voted to move forward on
So I don't
doing it.
know,
We're trying to decide which one to do
I don't
first.
know
or
if
which
they're
one
in the
second.
hands of this committee at this point.
Well, they are in the hands of this committee in the sense of this
But they
report.
were.
Okay.
So it is, but it's not in the sense of we're going to move forward.
I would actually ask that in the case of Elm Street, sooner rather than later, that be requested of this board, because the Board of Aldermen is in the process of looking at long-term bonding practices, and that being the larger project, that'll have to be fit into a schedule with other projects that are on the horizon as well.
With the one
Sooner or later means what? By the end of the,
is sooner.
well, by the end of June, by the end of July, what? What are you asking?
Well, by the end of June would be better.
So noted.
Just to follow up on our end, I am about 80% done with Mount Pleasant from a cost estimate standpoint. And then Elm Street we just received, and we're in the process of getting all the takeoff done so we can put some pricing to it. So we can try for the end of June. Elm is a large project. But we'll make every effort. I'd assure you we probably get Mount Pleasant for sure, and we'll make every effort to try to get Elm Street done by then for you.
Okay.
That'll be a feat.
I think if we can have reasonable estimates, you know, even if the 80% solution for some things might be valuable, just relative cost per square foot kind of number.
There's a lot of items on Elm Street to consider, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm guessing the discussion about educational use there was probably pretty wide-ranging, because there's a lot of areas in that building that,
Yes, being a middle school, it's a little different than the elementary. and the type of teaching, the team teaching in the middle school. The present layout was, as you know, was a high school. So there was a lot of discussion about how they teach in groups and how they would like to teach in groups. So that's a little different from the interview point of view from the Department of Ed standards, which is the first part. The second part is the interview, and then, of course, the auditorium was also interviewed, the committee as well, separately. There's a lot of things happening with the middle school program that the building really deals with the confines of the building itself, because it's very structured.
So I guess one thing to keep in mind is, I'm not sure where the Arts Center issue is going, but we should probably think about what happens to the Elm Street Auditorium if it's not used for those kinds of activities. And Alderman McCarthy's going to tell us. Alderman McCarthy.
It will certainly still be used for the symphony's large performances and for the actor-singers because they basically fill it. So there is need to do work there, and as I had suggested at one of our previous meetings, I think with the plan we were looking at for Elm Street, there's some things we can do to make the auditorium much more useful in terms of providing it with restroom facilities and
Well, now you're going too far.
unclogging the lobby a little bit and perhaps better separating it from the school facility itself to make it more usable.
Okay.
I do want to say that I think my concern with Elm Street is it's a big project. It's much more like this project than it is like the last one we just did. I would envision that we will probably spend a year on architecture and engineering, and we would probably appropriate that portion of the money first. We are going to have to go out and do an RFP for architects and construction managers based on the size of that project. So, you know, the sooner we can get that process underway, the better off we'll be.
Ms. Ventwiver.
I have a question about segregating it from the main building. What are you implying there? A wall?
No,
Because there are two,
so it's sort of naturally segregated by the corridor
yeah,
that runs through there, which is just sort of a hallway now. If when we do the additions, we use some of that space to put restrooms and that sort of stuff in, we can make it so that so that corridor can either be locked to the auditorium or locked to the school, so that either you can use it, you know, you can have the auditorium separated from the rest of the building when events are going on, or vice versa.
that would be advisable, because when we did the tour for when they wanted the alcohol thing, the back corridor was used quite frequently by the actor-singers, I think, and we couldn't protect the school from wrongdoers, perhaps, maybe.
Yeah, and I think we can come up with a plan that does that.
Mr.
If I
Dubois.
may, excuse me, if I may ask, so in our numbers that we're gonna present, are we talking a start of construction in 19 or 2020 for escalation purposes?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. And then the second part of my question would be, is there a way you want to see the cost broken out? Because it's so much easier if we know it going in. I mean, do you want to break out the additions from the renovations, or do you want to break out anything having to do with the performance center from the school? Just asking how you're going to evaluate this so we can give it to the way you need it to make those decisions.
Well, I mean, there are at least a couple of big blocks, right? There's the replacement of the old addition with the
The new.
multi-story classroom building. There's probably whatever other renovations need to be done, and then whatever the work is that could be attributed to the art center.
Okay.
The auditorium, anyway.
I guess the question I have is, because of the size of the school, you wouldn't then be considering a partial renovation on the more older wings, if I might say so, in that way. I mean, so it's all the renovations as one item. I don't need an answer tonight. You guys can get back to me. Before we start, it's so much easier to set it up and take it off accordingly so that we can substantiate the numbers for you.
I mean, if it's not substantially harder, break it down into as many chunks as you can so that we can look at them. I guess one of the things that I was thinking about when we talked about it is we ought to look at phasing and what can be done in what years so that the cost is staggered as well.
Yeah, we are in the process of looking at how to phase that project itself. That's a feat in itself, just trying to figure out how you're gonna get through it. Creating swing space like we have been doing, you know.
Mr. Farrington.
At the risk of muddying the waters, but we'll find out
Oh,
if,
have at it.
but we'll find out if anybody's listening tonight. This conversation seems to be based on the assumption that the report on the educational viability of the building will come back as generally positive or not requiring too much in the way of renovation. Is it at all conceivable that the kinds of recommendations that would come out of that report would drive the cost of this so high we would have to look at other alternatives?
It's going to definitely create some thought process about the existing facility, especially with Department of Ed. Those are basic standards that are part of the department. If we compare those existing spaces against the DOE, it'll be self-evident that if you need extra square footage, the report will conclude that. And it will include an approximate square footage as the basis of discussion.
I think the answer was yes.
It's,
In addition to additional square footage, is there a possibility the report would indicate a significant realignment or renovation or reconfiguration of the existing square footage?
between the middle school being a team teaching approach, that's going to definitely have some dynamics, how they're willing to stay with the existing configuration, or they're going to look at restructuring some of the walls. But more importantly, is to be understood, the last renovation in there was 1991. A lot has gone by since 1991. That was the last renovation. Original building's 36. 61 was the addition in the back, gym, cafeteria, in that area. I think it'll be very self-evident and revealing once we do the educational spec. The basis of doing the facility analysis will give you first what we've been doing with the other schools is a facility review basis of cost replacing. And again, some of the facility is worn. For instance, like doors and hardware. It's hard to try to pick. It's probably going to be more efficient. As part of our analysis is to replace them all. There's also the issues of the building being penetrated by some other outside forces. You really want to make sure the hardware meets today's standards with classroom functioning, with lockability from intrusion from the inside out. So there's a lot of little things that are in the facility report. It already picks those up. So there's areas like millwork and hardware and doors and windows that simply come to the point of worn out that should be replaced, to be quite honest.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Alderman McCarthy.
Yeah, I guess I would just point out, I mean, Elm Street is about half of our middle school capacity, and we're not going to build another one, and we can't possibly retire that one, so we almost have to get the project to fit somehow. With the exception that if it is extremely expensive, we do in fact have a lot to build another one on.
Mr. Farrington.
Which brings me back to my original question. I think that we may be getting a little ahead of ourselves until we know a little bit more about that report, planning on when we're going to start renovation there. It's going to be, would be a very difficult conversation to have in the community, but I think we have a responsibility to look at all those aspects.
I would point out I have the same exact concern about the other school under discussion.
Mount Pleasant, just so people know what we're talking about.
I feel that
Alderman
I'm not up to speed on the report's purpose, or so the school currently is functioning as a school, so it's legal. And you're saying that there's a report that's going to find out that what we're doing is not allowed anymore? We're going to have to make drastic changes just to make it usable?
So there's two reports that should get done when you do a renovation. One is a facilities analysis, so what the physical structure of the building. The other one is an educational analysis to determine whether the building is set up in such a way that it makes the kind of learning that's going on there efficient, and matches all the DOE standards. So once you start touching these buildings, right, you have to meet current standards, not 1991 standards. So it's just making sure that we're meeting those criteria. Does that answer the question, or I can have the architect answer that question?
Okay, so to use an analogy, it's people who own old houses that are fine. When you go to do plumbing changes, suddenly you have to replace every pipe in your house because somebody said it's not acceptable anymore.
Right.
Okay.
I would add that while the building appears to be structurally great at the moment, parts of it, namely the most recent addition, will likely not remain that way forever. So at some point, we're going to have to deal with that. The part that was built by the WPA will probably be there long after the apocalypse, but the additions will begin to fall off in some reasonably short period of time.
Let's hope we don't have to test that theory. Alderman Shonen.
Thank you. I just had a question about the size of the school. You said it represents half of our inventory. How many students do we have there, roughly? I could look it up, but as long as we're here, I thought maybe.
About half the students. How about that?
Half a middle school. I'll find out when I get home. That's fine, thanks.
I think it's on the order of
850 a class, and that's what, three grades?
I think we have about 2,500 kids in middle school, and that school's about
A
1,100.
little less than 1,200 probably at Elm Street.
Okay, thank you.
Any other,
3.
say that again?
900 kids per grade times 3 divided by 2.
Microphone if you're gonna comment.
So this is approximately 900 kids per grade times 3 divided by 2?
Yeah, it may be 850. I'm just not sure at middle school.
Okay,
what the
okay,
level
gotcha.
is. We actually have actual numbers we could just probably provide that would be easier than me guessing.
It was 890 kids per grade times 3 divided by 2.
something.
All right, Mr. Smith.
Just a little bit more on the cost. I think what's really going to drive this and what should really be reflected when Carl does his numbers is the changes in the mechanical and electrical systems. Remember, the school was built based on steam, heat, the controls are done by pneumatics, little plastic tubes running behind the walls. So that's going to be a huge number. And then when you try to put a modern plant like that into a facility this old, Carl can talk to it some more, but going through roof penetrations, going through floors, that's going to be very challenging. And I think we're going to find that out when the final numbers are available.
I mean, typically, you look back on the projects you've done already, and I think the mechanical, electrical, plumbing probably represents greater than 40% of the project. And you're probably talking, you're going to be approaching $35, $40 a square foot for mechanical. Not quite sure on the plumbing. Electrical could be over $20 a square foot, so you could be easily in the $55 a square foot range, and that building is how big?
205,000 square feet.
That's just 2 trades. That's not the support to put it in, that's not the structure. This will be, I have a number in mind, and I expressed it to Sean. I said, this is going to be a sizable project to get through, not only in construction, but what it's going to take to phase it in and to get through it. We've been fortunate over these last 5, 6 schools where it's all single level. Mount Pleasant, as I discussed before, presents some challenges where you're putting the rooftop units on the roof and you have to feed it down to the bottom floor. So you almost have to look at it, instead of going horizontal, you got to look at slicing this thing up vertically so that you can complete the work. And when you look from Mount Pleasant to Elm Street, it's exponential. It's so much larger.
Let me just interject. So there, for 2017-18, we're projecting 2,480 elementary school students, 6, 7, and 8. 1,088 of those are at Elm Street, 733 at Fairgrounds, and 659 at Pennachuck. Ms.
The-
McDwyer.
Your scientific wild guess at the cost, does it come close to building north or south? The cost, it doesn't come that close?
I don't think you'll be that high, but
Well, that's good.
Well, for one thing, we don't have to build a building from scratch, so that's probably helpful. Alderman Moriarty.
This question probably could have done offline, but what the heck? So I don't know if I understood what you're saying, that HVAC for single level is easier to do than 2 level, because you got to go from the top floor down to the first floor. But maybe that isn't what you're saying, but for instance, some old houses where steam heat can be renovated to forced air by putting 2 different, one on the basement to blow up and the other one in the ceiling to blow down. Can you do that in the industrial?
if there's space provided,
Right.
I mean, we've been fortunate in some schools where we were able to recoup storage areas that we converted into mechanical rooms. On the last project on Sunset that we just finished, we added mechanical rooms on the end of each wing in order to get that distribution down to an appropriate size. The problem when you get into a multi-story building, the ductwork coming out of the unit is fairly large and shrinks as you start to make your way down vertically through a building. The problem is you can't close off an entire floor without affecting everybody below you, because you got plumbing that you got to get underneath the ceiling and handle traps and the sanitary lines. You've got mechanical lines coming down. So we're looking at trying to find a way to break this up in vertical pieces so you can complete it in vertical pieces. And it's a little difficult because not all the engineering there's been no engineering done. I've got a written narrative, and from that written narrative, you got to build it in your head in terms of how you're going to go through this thing. Like, I can speak more in depth on Mount Pleasant because I've already gone through it once. And there's no swing space at all. That gymnasium is probably the smallest gym in the city. We'd be lucky to probably get 2, maybe 3 classrooms
Yes, and egress becomes an issue.
if we squeeze it down. But because of the nature of it being vertical, you almost need 7 or 8 or 9 classrooms in order to get that transition and spread out. So you're going to see, and we've already done it once, but you'll see in this revised estimate that's coming along that you're going to end up having to pay for temporary classrooms, units outside in order to try to get this done in an efficient manner. There's just, you can't, to break it up into small 1 classroom increments, it would take forever, and the cost would be astronomical. So we're looking at how many units does it really take? I think we've got Mount Pleasant wrapped up. Now we're looking at this big white elephant and seeing how we're gonna get through that one. So that's the first thing. We're getting the takeoff started. We're also wrestling internally with how to work our way through the building efficiently and still be able to, keep normal school day running. The combination of those two, we'll come back to you with what the cost is gonna be.
Ms. Ventwiver.
You inquired about what year we were thinking about doing this.
Mhm.
I assume you want to build your costs depending upon the inflation. Was that your purpose?
Absolutely. I mean, there's been a big inrush of work this year, and it doesn't appear to be slowing down. And we're starting to see escalation rates like we haven't seen in a while. So I'm just I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what holds 2 years out, but we either got to escalate it out to 19 if there's going to be a year of design, assuming that year of design would be through the 2018 year. We wouldn't purchase the project in 2019 at the earliest, and potentially maybe 2020 by the time you'd get through everything. So that's why I was asking whether it's a 19 start or a 2020 start.
But you said you see a lot of work now that Things are increasing.
There's a tremendous amount of work out there right now. To the point where, I'll be honest with you, we're bidding work and we're seeing one electrician, maybe 2 mechanical contractors. Where before you could put a call out and get a minimum of 3, sometimes 5. People's plates are filled up right now. Firms are very, very busy.
So the economy is good, huh?
Appears to be.
Alderman McCarthy.
Is steel inflating faster or about the same as mechanical or the other way around?
Right now, you're seeing, I think labor's finally starting to move. Petroleum products, you see the price of gas. I mean, it's been fairly stable, and petroleum products, plastics and things like that have been fairly stable. Ready mix is on the rise. We get notices all the time, potential increase. It's potential, but you get the letters that, come across the wire that we pick up all the time.
It just occurs to me that in Elm Street's case, we have a lot of HVAC work to do throughout the building, and we have a big construction project to do as well. We ought to figure out which of those should be done first.
But again, in order to put those new mechanical systems in, as you saw just on the projects that we've completed, there's a fair amount of selective demolition, getting through the walls, creating chases, getting through the floors, whatever related abatement may go along with that in order to get it accomplished.
Well, one of the things I was thinking is if we put the classroom addition on first, did not take out the portables at that point, that then gives you swing space
Yep.
to do the rest of the renovations. And the last thing we could do, which is probably the least inflation anyway, is remove the portables and pave the lot in the back.
Right. No, we're looking at all of it right now. I'll be frank with you, we don't have a game plan yet. We're still evaluating it. But in order to try to push this thing along, we've got 2 people doing quantity takeoff right now so we can establish all the materials that have to go into it.
Mr. Smith.
Just a note that we do own the 4 portable classroom buildings at Elm Street.
Thank you, Mrs.
So,
Zine. She's the one who convinced us to buy them, so, rather than continue to lease them. All right. Any other discussion?
Portables anywhere else at the
Yes,
moment?
we do. We have them at Pennachuck. I noticed them the other day, and I was just going to ask about those when they got there. Have they been there for a while?
All right. Mr. Smith?
They've been there for a while, yes.
And do we own those, or did?
We own those.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you own them all.
Thank you.
Is that the alternative school?
And just to remind everybody, because I like to remind everybody, we had a lot more portables than that way back when we did the first facility analysis that often gets thrown around. And those are all gone, and that's a school. So, for the record. Any other discussion? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn by Mr. Farrington. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We're adjourned at 7:42.
Portables in the housing.